The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Wow, yes, we're born to be alive, and you're listening to Until Now with Rosie Pekar. Yes, it is an Australian accent. My guest today is another Australian as we talk to ordinary people with extraordinary experiences. For those that want to join the chat live, just go across to w4cy.com and click on the link on the right-hand side, and you can ask your questions and I'll get them in during the show. But this week's amazing and incredible guest is Wayne Donnelly, featuring from Down Under yet again, and he's a master of mentally getting the results that we want. So, but through a tool that has come to more and more prevalence in today's modern world, known as hypnotism. So if you're after mental mastery and you're wondering, can he control me against my will, and what is in hypnosis for me, and what benefits or what drawbacks are there, we've got the perfect person to answer all these questions today. So I'd like you to make welcome Wayne Donnelly. I've got you here live.
Thanks very much, Rosie, and thank you for such a lovely introduction.
You're welcome. And I'll speak slower for our guests so they can follow our Australian accents. But our first listener has asked, is that dangerous? Is it dangerous me talking down under to Wayne, or is it dangerous that we're talking about hypnosis? I'm just teasing with you. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest on this topic. So first off, for my understanding for hypnosis, it's been around for a long, long time. And prior to the term of hypnotism that's commonly used today, it was known as mesmerism, from Franz Anton Mesmer back in the 1700s, 1800s. So can you tell me what is hypnotism so our listeners can understand straight away what it is we're actually talking about?
Well, very simply, it's tapping into the power of your unconscious mind, and hypnotism is a way to get there. What is it? Hypnosis is a very common experience, and we're in and out of hypnosis or a trance-like state many times a day.
So I was going to say, it's like a brain state that we already have anyway. You just help people to access it more at will, or to be able to utilise it better for themselves within their own lives?
Yeah, to be able to harness it. If you think when someone's talking to you and you lose interest and you drift off into somewhere else, wherever that is, that's almost like a trance, because you're redirecting the focus of where your thoughts are instead of being engaged in the conversation. When whenever you daydream and you're making up pictures and communicating to yourself what's happening in regard to that drifting, or when we go to sleep at night, we get into bed, we're not awake, we're not asleep, we're in the twilight zone, both going to sleep and waking up. All those things are sort of the depth of, you can relate.
I'm just laughing, thinking you've got people in the twilight zone just before, they fall asleep. I've got a lot of people walking around me in the twilight zone permanently.
It seems like that. Well, it's really working with the power of our thoughts. I mean, most of us are on autopilot anyway, from the conditioning that we've had growing up and the beliefs that we've taken on. So from my point of view, everybody already is in trance, or everyone already is hypnotised. And then when I work them, I step into their world for a little while to bring them over to mine and maybe help them change their reality about what the world is.
Okay, now I'm just going to ask a few questions that the listeners have asked, and one is that I heard people won't do what they wouldn't do regularly is that true? So under hypnosis, you would do actions that you wouldn't normally do. And I think many of us have seen those entertaining shows where people stand up and they cluck like chickens or woof, bark like a dog, or, conduct a symphony. And I can't remember the famous Australian one's name, but I remember he did a segment that when particular music came on, it was a trigger for them to kiss the closest person to them. And of course this would happen at regular intervals during the evening. Yeah. But I've just got to share this a little bit. I found a hilarious part of where at one point the music came on and everyone looked at all the people that had been hypnotized aware they're about to kiss someone. And this one guy was walking past the bar, and at that time he looked at the barman on the other side of the bar, and I don't know whose eyes widened the biggest, the barman or the poor man who was hypnotized, as the hypnotized man then leapt the bar to give him a kiss.
Yes. Well, that would have been Martin St. James singing "On in the Midst of Love."
That's it.
And that was the trigger, and so we can use those triggers. But will you do things that you don't normally do? And I have two answers, yes and no, which really makes it clear, doesn't it? So the reason I say yes,
some barriers
you wouldn't ordinarily do, is because when people come to see me to create a change, say if it's smoking, weight loss, drugs, alcohol, they want to make that change, but they can't do it, and they can't ordinarily do it. So we use hypnosis to enable them or to empower them to be able to do the things that they couldn't ordinarily do.
Exactly. And one of my friends that was hypnotised at Martin St. James' show, he was under the influence to go up and conduct a invisible orchestra, and he did it with much gusto at the top of the stage every time. And when he sat back down and he's talking to me normally, I did say to him, why do you keep going back up to the stage when the music is played and conducting an orchestra that no one is there with so much enthusiasm? And he said to me, his answer was, I just don't see a reason why not to.
Yes, because what's happening when you're up on stage, and the feedback I often get is people say, look, I know what I was doing, I just couldn't help myself. It was like I was a little kid and mum and dad just said, go and do this. Or some people don't remember anything and just do things as you instruct. And when you had that first question, people say, oh, is it dangerous? Well, gee, my role on stage when I'm performing a comedy hypnosis show is to look after the very people that are my volunteers on stage. So it's certainly not dangerous. Otherwise, I wouldn't have people come to a show.
Okay, now I'm just going to intercede as devil's advocate here, because I come from a background of 16 years law enforcement and investigations. So when people ask the question, how easy is it to get someone under, and just what can people make you do under the influence? As an investigator, it has been used as a defence previously, as ludicrous as I found it, that they had been hypnotised and instructed to do the criminal action.
Okay, then we go into all sort of conspiracy theories. Go straight to, and it's all over YouTube and various online forums, the CIA's Ultra program, whatever that was. And I think a hypnotist in England conducted an experiment, and you can see the full series of it, where he hypnotises someone to do a dummy assassination. And in this case, it was on Steve Fry. And he had the blue polka dot dress because he was trying to recreate the Robert Kennedy assassination. And the young Pakistani guy who got convicted of that, Sirhan, to this day, or to the day of that production anyway, couldn't remember assassinating Robert Kennedy. And so this Darren Brown was trying to recreate, is it possible to have someone be able to do this? And it certainly lent towards that. So we can get people do extraordinary things.
My layperson's understanding has been that you would only still do what you were socially or morally comfortable in a sense to do. So, for example, if someone said, pick up that knife and go stab the person next to you, if you morally found that repugnant, or said, hey, walk to the edge of that cliff and jump off that cliff, and you still had within you a safety net to go, no, that endangers me, that it doesn't override that. Would that be correct, my belief in that, or it's unfounded? Can you get someone to do something?
In a sense, yes, that's correct. And then if we change it around, and what is possible when you're working with the mind is to change the meaning of the situation. So when you say, look, go and pick up a knife and stab a whole bunch of people, in our conditioning and moral upbringing, no, we wouldn't do that. However, what if you conscripted and sent overseas, as a lot of young men were sent to Vietnam and other theatres of war, where they had to pick up guns and shoot people, even though it's against what we would ordinarily do in our modern lifestyle. So say if we said to someone, yeah, go and pick up a knife and stab someone, well, no, they wouldn't do it because they wouldn't ordinarily do it. But what if we changed their identity to become someone who does that? Right, you're now in the war, you're a commando, and they take on that identity. And so you've changed the whole context, the whole meaning of the situation, and you work from there.
Okay, I get that. Wow. That for me has opened up a Pandora's box of questions. I'll just go to some of the listeners' questions before I start throwing mine at you. Prepare for a veritable onslaught. So some of the listeners have commented, some people walk through life like that, and yes, that's true, that trance-like state. How can it help people change? Well, I guess we're going to cover some more of that, of how to get rid of those things in life that hold us back instead of, allow us to live more fully as we believe ourselves to be. How do you let someone get you to do these things? Well, I guess you do it in a forum of entertainment and also in aiding and assisting people, but I guess there could be many answers here. But finally, what if the hypnotist didn't know you had it in you to do that? And that was in question, I guess, to us, saying that you could pick up a knife and go and stab someone nearby. Now, that really lays a lot of onus and responsibility onto not only the person receiving hypnotism, but also the hypnotists themselves. But that allows another question to flow through in my mind, which is, do we always know when we're being hypnotised?
No, we don't. When you come to see me, whether it's in a therapy situation or in a show situation, it's pretty well known. I'm a hypnotist. I'm going to work with your mind and I'm going to either help you to create a more positive future through changing your mind to be able to behave in a more powerful and empowering way, or you're going to be hypnotised to do some funny stuff in a show. So people know that. But when are we being hypnotised when we don't know? We can be, it can be anywhere, anytime, any place, whether it's coming across on the TV through marketing, whether it's coming
subliminal programming,
or even in conversational hypnosis. They say that Hitler was one of the greatest hypnotists of all time through the speeches that he would give at the various Nazi rallies to build up his crowd. He was a master at working the crowd into a frenzy to go in a certain direction. So there's a lot of responsibility on the facilitator, if you like, because they may not say they're a hypnotist, but they could be trying to create some sort of influence to change what you do.
Exactly. I've certainly seen on a few TV programs where they've had a hypnotist come up or a master magician come up and talk with people and create an illusion, I guess, that has just occurred right in front of their eyes. And it has been through the use of the positioning of particular props that they've come across repeatedly prior to that last incident that's then filmed. And those props, like, for example, seeing the number 7 repeatedly occurring, they then identify that's the first number that's in their mind, but they're unaware where they've seen 7, at least 15, 20 times beforehand.
Well, that's how marketing works. I think it's commonly understood in marketing that people have to see the ad or the image or the symbol a certain number of times, I think it's 10 to 13 times, before they become consciously aware that they've seen it. So
yes,
when we talked about the difference between the conscious and unconscious mind, which I'll just tap into for a second, I use the analogy of an iceberg. The conscious mind is the little bit of iceberg we can see above the water, and it's aware of about 7 bits of information a second, plus or minus 2. And then the unconscious mind is everything else under the water. It's aware of everything that's happening around.
And then would I throw in the superconscious mind that is the water?
Well, then we go even further. But when you're looking at that, I would trust the superconscious mind more so.
Exactly.
Because the unconscious can be is the place where our programs are and our beliefs, which are dictating which 7 bits of information our conscious mind is aware of. So now let's do it.
So for our listeners that are listening, I'll just give them a snapshot understanding. So when your lips are moving, your conscious mind is operating. So when your conscious mind is operating, as vast as we think that data being received is, it's really limited to what's actually available. However, your subconscious mind is a bit like your keyboard or on your computer, your hard drive, that at a finger's touch, you can access any key that brings up a whole lot of data, stored information, retrieves in a millisecond, or what's been installed and put in there before. So that's a little bit, for today's generation to understand how quickly and how fast and how resourceful and how much data can be stored in that area, as opposed to our conscious mind, which is like that finger hitting a key.
Well, let me add to that, Rosie. Right now, you're aware, and so are the listeners, of the sound of our voices. You also may be aware of the device that you're using, whether it's a computer, iPad, iPhone, and you may also be aware of the chair that you're sitting in. But you're not aware of the feeling of one of your feet on the floor until I draw your conscious attention to it, even though your unconscious was aware all the time that your foot was there on the floor.
Yes, or in my case, underneath my butt.
Okay.
I like to sit on them. I get really comfortable during the program. So now with our listeners here, some of the questions is, when we're asked, can you control me against my will? And you've prefaced that saying that in your role, you do it with their permission to work against what has been their learnt will. For example, someone might be, overeating or choosing, to eat lots of McDonald's or KFC or foods that we know. I'm using obvious examples here, that don't lead to from a continued use to a result that we want. So on a session like that, what would be a normal experience that you would have with a client?
Okay. There's a couple of issues here. First is the permission one, which is very important. People are coming along with a request to make a change when they're doing change work, and as soon as they come up on stage, they're giving me permission to come and play. So can we do things against their will? In the quit smoking, weight loss and aversion type things, yes, because if they had the will, they wouldn't be smoking or overeating. So
yes.
I'll certainly help them to do things against their will in that context. So in the experience they're going to have with me when I'm doing a change session is I'll take them through a number of different experiences while they're both in and out of what we'd formerly call trance, to compel them to change what they're doing. So we might create an aversion or a phobia for cigarettes, for example, so that it's something that would make them sick, or it's unpleasant, or they won't even touch it because it'll burn their fingers. It's a funny routine in a show, but it also works very well in therapy. And then I will also do some other things which will get them to experience their own death by smoking or overeating, not looking after themselves, and then I'll get them to experience what life is like when they change. So it creates a very compelling reason for the unconscious mind to rewire, reconnect, and change their behaviour.
Okay, so now I've got, there's the ideomotor, I could probably pronounce that incorrectly, is accepted as a real phenomenon, and it simply means that the subconscious mind can cause the body to move in certain ways without the conscious mind being aware. So I would think that it being utilised in a sense when I've seen people to act or talk like aliens and they produce a language that two people seem to be communicating with each other and completely understanding.
Yeah, that's right. That happens. So the first thing you touched on was the idiometer signals, which is a feedback mechanism to that their unconscious mind is acknowledging that they're communicating with me as I facilitate the hypnosis session. And so it could be that while they're it could even be with their eyes open. It doesn't matter whether your eyes are open and closed. You can still talk to the unconscious mind of the other person, and it can signal to you. It might be it could be anything. It could be a move of a finger, a tap of a foot, a changing in the colour of the complexion of the face. So there's a whole number of things that it can be, and it can very clear. And you can also ask their unconscious mind to give you very clear signals for yes and for no. And that can help guide you to the solution, or help guide their unconscious mind to the solution that they've come to see you for.
So I'm just, I'm still thinking in terms of its uses. So, you know, obviously there's the ones like stop smoking, losing weight. Is trauma and grief like to deal with and combat? Is that something you would also see?
Oh, yeah. PTSD is fairly common, and there's a number of hypnotic strategies to take away the power or your perception of the power of past events, so that the event doesn't have control of you. You have control over how you communicate to yourself about the meaning of that event.
Especially with past events too, because, I mean, you know, none of us can turn back the hands of time and undo events that have occurred. We've only got here and now to work with. That's
right. So, say if it was in a therapy situation, we go back, we don't go back into the event to re-experience it. Say if it was, well, it could be anything. I mean, it could be abuse as a child. It could be an event during battle, or whatever it is. And we can, through hypnosis, remove that event from our timeline and replace it with a meaning that's more powerful. And then allow you to, when it's safe to do so, drop down and coach that younger version of yourself on how to handle things more effectively. It's that's only a glimpse of the idea of what I'm working with, or how I'm working to help facilitate a change.
Yes. Now, for our listeners, like, I'm curious, because I recall back in my early 20s when I was still a police officer in a country location, and I had grown up in a fairly violent background. So I didn't really carry fear with me into my new career. However, when I went and saw a clinical hypnotherapist, and I went and saw him for stress in my marriage at the time, and under hypnosis, I can recall turning my head completely as if to face away from the hypnotist, tears streaming down my face, and it being pure black. And whatever that black was, because he was asking me to tell me what I saw, and I saw nothing, but I had such intense emotion flowing through from me. I'm just curious, if that were your experience, what would that indicate to you, or where you would take it from there? Or,
well, when I'm working with someone, I don't know what the meaning is that they're giving to things, except that it may be a bit negative, which is why they're there with me. So the first thing I'd do is ask them to calibrate for me the power of that particular event. So say if it's, on a scale of 0 to 100, how traumatic are you feeling about this event? Or whatever the label that you've given for the particular emotion. So 0 is nothing, 100's over the top. And they might give me a certain number. So then we go and do a few different things, and I'm getting their feedback, saying, well, okay, is this, say if it was your situation, is that and can you step back from it, or can you push it further away from you? What happens? Okay, what happens if you change the colour? What happens if you change the shape or the size? What if you push that a bit further back and you just push it further and further away? Where are you now on that scale? Okay.
Okay, so it's irrespective whether they actually see something. It's working with the feelings that they have to minimise those feelings or replace them with better feelings?
Yeah, well, first of all, we want to do a couple of things to reduce the experience that they're having in regard to the negative emotion. And so we'll be calibrating them. We'll be saying, well, how can you change the way you communicate with yourself in regard to whatever that black is? So it could be something you see, something you feel, something you hear that you're saying to yourself. It could be a taste. It could be a smell. It could be a thought. And we say, okay, there's a number of different ways that we can utilise your representation of whatever the meaning is to be able to change that meaning and eventually turn it around into something that empowers you.
Okay, so for listeners, it sounds like this may be an easily accessible tool that they can utilise for themselves without actually going to a hypnotist for their own strategy to deal with grief or difficulty or challenge or trauma. Would that be correct, that they can still utilise their conscious mind in a sense to implant thoughts to play with or not?
Yeah. To an extent, because we're still limited by our own beliefs.
Okay, I'm not kicking you out of your job. I'm just making sure that we've got a global reach. I want to make sure that people that aren't here on the Gold Coast and not accessible or within Australia that would see your shows or locations that you're at, of what they could utilise for themselves as a form of self-hypnosis, because I know Edgar Cayce, one of the most famous trance channelers who did over 10,000 recorded readings, was able to successfully self-hypnotise and was able to re-educate his conscious self via his subconscious self. So I'm wondering, is this a tool or something that listeners can take advantage of for themselves?
Yes, they can, because we're hypnotising ourselves all the time. And unfortunately, most of the time it's a negative form of hypnosis, because most people get worried and anxious. And even if you look to the beginning of this program, the questions were more about all the negative consequences of the misuse of this incredible power, rather than focusing on the positive potential that it could really develop. So how we communicate to ourselves is really, really important. So if we keep giving something a negative meaning, well, we could first of all, we could ask ourselves, what else could this mean? Or how else could I look at this in a way that takes away the negative emotion in this? And you could do it a number of ways. You could be asking the questions, changing the shape, the colour, the form, the size, the sound, the location. You could even move yourself, because while you're fixed in a fixed position physically, like you're sitting in a chair, maybe your head's looking down, maybe you're focusing on negative thoughts. What if you stood up, left the room, went for a walk? You're changing what's happening to you physically. And there's an old saying, motion changes emotion.
Yes.
So you free yourself up to be able to review or look at the circumstance in a different way, so you can take the power out of it. There's a lot of visualizations you can do about removing the power.
It seems there's a lot of crossovers between NLP, psychoneuroimmunology, hypnosis, and brain entrainment. I guess they all fall under, accessing and utilising what we have at our fingertips, because I know a lot of medical issues, doctors in the past used to say, it was psychological, or it's all in your mind, which is the absolute worst possible place it could be, because you can't escape your thoughts. It's like trying to outrun your legs. It simply doesn't happen. So people have their thoughts as their best friends or their own worst enemies. So I just want to make sure those that are listening, you're listening to W4CY radio. If you want to ask questions, go to w4cy.com and click on the right-hand side. I've got a few listeners that have asked a few questions that I'll just catch up with. Is this easy to do, referring to hypnosis, and is the show fun to watch? For those that haven't seen a show, it's hilarious, so I can't recommend. Wayne's got some shows coming up. If you happen to be in Australia on the Gold Coast this Saturday and in Brisbane on Sunday, so I would hot-foot it down there. I don't think that has changed. I still don't trust it, but it can be fun to watch others go through it. It can be hilarious, but the next question is the one that I really want to get to, because the question is, what if you think you can't be put under? Will that stop things?
Yeah, because you're already hypnotised that you don't think you can be put under. Doesn't mean it can't happen. It's just that you're in your own little trance saying, oh, it's not going to happen to me. Quite often people surprise themselves if they give themselves permission to allow the experience to happen. Usually the reason why people, there's two aspects of why people don't think they can be hypnotised. One's the definition, or what is hypnosis, and the second one is the fear of what's going to happen to them. I get quite a common response at shows is people put their hand up over their eyes and say, don't look into my eyes.
Oh, you will control that. Well, that's where mesmerism came from. It was originally thought it was a form of telepathy, and then it was through the use of magnetic mesmerism that it was the magnets that drew an energy force from you. And then they realised, no, well, effects were occurring whether or not we had the magnets, so therefore it must just be a crock.
No. So it's if people allow themselves, get over the fear, like we don't live in the Middle Ages.
Exactly.
And I'm not going to look at you and go zap, even though I do instant and rapid inductions. It's which is taking people very quickly into that deeply relaxed state where they can be able to receive suggestions.
Is that a skill that is learnt, Wayne, or is that something that any layperson can immediately access and do?
Anyone can go and learn how to do it. There's a number. If you go onto YouTube, you can go and see a whole bunch of videos on people doing rapid inductions, instant inductions, slower inductions. Anyone can learn how to
So in a sales conference, is this something you get asked to do to make instant sale? I can just see a whole new hype.
Okay, then if we're going into if we're going into the world of communication where people don't know that hypnosis is happening, then we're using conversational hypnosis and also NLP to be able to influence people to make a buying decision. And if anyone's gone to a free seminar and walked out with a bunch of products, maxing out their credit card, they've just been subject to the misuse of NLP and conversational hypnosis, and it really miffs me that happens.
And I've actually seen, I can't recall the program. I watch too many things because I'm putting together documentaries myself. So I watch snippets from all over the place just to see how they cut and edit and put things together. However, this segment was on a professional hypnotist who was in the streets of either the UK or the US and was just going up and conversationally talking to people. And some people were saying very clearly, no, other people have tried to hypnotise me and been unsuccessful. And sure enough, that person is actually hypnotised because they then get them to do actions that is obviously inane and ridiculous. And then they snap their fingers and then the person's there, completely oblivious that they've actually just done these ridiculous actions, proving to everyone else watching that they're under hypnosis, but they're still standing there saying, you can't hypnotise me. I'm not the type to get hypnotised, but thanks for trying anyway. Appreciate your effort. So how is that a suggestion that's put in, that you'll be completely unaware of what's just transpired, or how does that work?
Well, a lot of people, even when they're hypnotised, don't think they're hypnotised. That happens a lot for a lot of therapy work. So it's very important to give someone the experience to convince them, because otherwise they'll say all sorts of things like, I heard everything you said. Well, that's great, because I didn't hypnotise you to death.
Your ears still work. Wow, that's amazing.
How are you going to take the suggestions if you can't hear them? So, and what they're referring to is they think they're conscious. And so usually what I'll do is create a hypnotic phenomena called catalepsy. So it might be their arm gets stuck in the air and they can't move it. And you get them to experience, you get them to try to pull the arm down, but they can't do anything to control their arm. It seems like it's out of their control, and their eyes are wide open and they're walking around or sitting down and they can't pull this arm down. So that says to them, well, gee, I must be hypnotised, which is very effective for allowing them to acknowledge that they've had a session of hypnosis.
Now, I'm aware with others like in the US that use hypnotic suggestion for not only time life regression, so you can go back in time to events that we may not recall clearly, however, is there still stored in our subconscious mind, in order to alleviate either where chronic pain or mental anguish may have established a root and remove it. And they also use it not just for within this life, but also past life regressions. Is that something you go into, or you leave that to others in that arena?
Well, generally I think that we've got enough issues in this life without having to go back to another one. But it's
looking for more. It's like those people that think they don't have enough problems and then keep talking about everybody else's as if they don't have enough.
I'd rather go into the future and look at the wonderful opportunities that the future can bring about for me. If someone's really focused on, and their belief or the view of the world is they want to go back to a past life, well, sure, we'll go there and we'll guide them safely into that place where they can resolve whatever issues they think that they've got there. And sure, some people will recount things in great detail. So whatever their experience is their experience. And you work with them through those things so that they can have a better outcome in the here and now. So that's something that can be done. It's an experience. Some people purely focus on that.
So medically, for pain management, because I know brain entrainment certainly works amazingly, and I do programs for PTSD, and, you know, certainly have worked with lots of individuals as well as have lots of good friends that have those issues. And, you know, recently I had my own physical trauma of thinking I was channeling my 35-year-old self as I went out on the squash courts and discovered my almost 51-year-old self didn't want to quite move as quickly as the 35-year-old self. And, you know, they use the term popped a disc, herniated a disc, and in my lumbar spine. And the pain, and on not initially, but that following 24 hours was quite extraordinary. Now, I've used mental techniques and psychological techniques that I'm aware of to alleviate, and within 2 days have been off all prescribed medication. So is that something that, you know, when people have, you know, chronic issues but aren't able to lay their finger on what it was that caused it, is it necessary to find that cause to alleviate it in their mind, to uproot it, or is simply just addressing, you know, where it is within the body to utilise the mind to bring about healing you find effective? Okay,
so there's a couple of things that are in that. There's healing, there's alleviation of pain. And another issue which should be talked about in that also is a doctor's referral. So if there's if a doctor's gone over your symptoms or your pain, because pain can be a warning. So if you take away someone's headache and then they miss out on diagnosing a brain tumour, that would be a bad. So when I'm working with someone in pain, I either want a doctor's referral or a report to show me that they've gone to seek help and there's been no physiological evidence or source for the pain they're experiencing.
So a known contributor that's pretty apparent.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't want to put someone into a situation where they don't have symptoms so they don't go and seek help. But then if you look at the flip side of it, someone's experiencing pain because they've got cancer, then that's already a known, and whatever's happening is happening. And then you work in various ways to be able to assist that person to change or reduce the power of that experience.
And there's also, again, more flip sides to it. You know, the coin has more than two sides, especially when we think of things in a circumference that we have with that in this wonderful planet that we live on. So many results that are, you know, medically considered extraordinary, but extraordinary is becoming more ordinary every day. So there are many ways to bring about results. And, you know, that's what I'm a champion of, is I like people to get more informed on as many topics as possible so that way they make the best decisions and choices within their own lives for the results that they after. So I'm not there telling people what they should do or shouldn't do. That's for each individual responsible as a senior physician in their own health care. So for our own mind management, what would you see as the greatest benefits of hypnosis?
It's a tool to help people create the life that they really want. I mean, if you look at the if you listen to, you can download this off Kindle, that or Amazon, that Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich, did a series of lectures, and he often repeats in them that the greatest gift we have is the ability to take control of our mind, and hypnosis is a tool that you can use to help you to do that. Exactly.
The mind of man is the mind of the one who thinks he can.
Yes.
Is the difference between those who do and those that don't. So, okay, so we've covered physical ailments, we've covered dealing with issues within our lives that we don't want to see in our lives anymore. So we're envisioning a better future for ourselves that we can take control of instantaneously, wherever we are, whenever we are. So what drawbacks, if any, as a professional hypnotist, would you counsel our listeners on if they were seeking out a hypnotist?
Okay, then we don't want people practicing on you who have only studied on YouTube. Like getting a diploma out of a cornflakes packet.
Yes.
Because...
the same place where some people get their driver's licenses.
Yeah,
that's another topic.
I think we've all experienced that. So because a trained hypnotist or hypnotherapist is going to be able to be aware of negative consequences. So say there's a common thing called an abreaction. So you're taking someone to an experience and all of a sudden they might go, instead of reframing that experience, they go to relive it, and it may not be beneficial for them. And so it might appear that their emotions intensify, that they're starting to freak out. And if you're a trained hypnotherapist, you're going to be able to alleviate that so that the client ends up having a good experience and actually overcomes whatever it was that was causing that abreaction.
Exactly. We don't voluntarily seek out more pain in our lives.
No, sure.
And not from a professional.
Although some people repeat the experience, repeat the lesson until they've learned. And then another thing is, okay, when someone gets hypnotised, and this is a thing that some people fear is, well, what if we don't wake up? Well, everyone eventually wakes up because it's just a trance. You're going to come back out. But if you're in a clinic or a show situation, what if someone doesn't come out of hypnosis and they just stay there looking like they're asleep? Are they going to sleep forever? Well, you have to be trained to know how to bring people back, even if they don't want to come back initially, because they're so relaxed and they're so enjoying the experience of deep relaxation that hypnosis can provide. So you've really got to make sure that you've got someone who's been formally trained, that and you get some references, because you want to know what the experience of other people. It's like if you want to get a good builder, you want to go and see what he's built, get some references, make sure he's part of an association. It's the same thing.
Yep, test it out. Okay, so I ask all my guests, if you had the most extraordinary experience that you can recall to share, what would that be from your journey as a hypnotist? What have you found the most extraordinary?
That's a big question.
It is a big question. So I'm just to close on, I know from, reading Brian Weiss's books, I found it extraordinary to hear of the amazing synchronicity that occurred in people's lives, and he was able to witness it simply by the mere fact that here they were in his consulting room, and he knew their stories and the interconnectivity, how amazing it's been, to bring this all about. It lets us know that, in a sense, that we're never, ever alone.
Okay. The experience that's been the most powerful and also the most humbling is a client who came to me who'd been on, they considered themselves an alcoholic, 57 years of drinking since starting at 7 when Grandma and Granddad started them on sherry and lemonade. At the time they came to see me, 2 bottles of red and a bottle of scotch every night. And this person was ready to change. That's a very powerful part of it.
Yes.
And there was a moment, and we only had one session, and I have to stress that this person was ready to change. Sometimes you have to take a few sessions to get there. And there was a moment in the session, as we were going through some different things, that their eyes, their whole body froze, and you could be watching their eyes, and it was like having a system reboot. It's probably the best way to describe it. Well,
it's wonderful to know that our identities that aren't enabling us aren't set in concrete. I think that's the most powerful message that I'm receiving in being heard, that if I've got, negative aspects or virtues that are not virtues, that I can get rid of them. And just a couple more questions just as we're about to close. Have you ever gone under? Yes, I have, and it's an interesting story, but I'm going to connect with Wayne, and I'll go under with Wayne as well. Go under, down under. There's a new program for you to show, Wayne.
Go under, down under. I love it.
And are people able to put you in a state of hypnosis, I think your typo was? Well, again, it's just another state of mind. So I think if you move into every state of mind, you're able to go into hypnosis. But I'm going to ask Wayne to connect me to my superconscious, and I'm going to have a whole list of questions for him to ask, and I'm going to get those results, and I'll share it with you. So I'm really interested to see what comes about from that. So for those that have been listening, you're listening to w4cyradio.com on Until Now with Rosie Pekar and Wayne Donnelly as our Master Hypnotist. Now, Wayne's got some shows locally down under in Gold Coast and Brisbane. And is there a link if people are interested to know more from further afield? Where can they go to, Wayne?
If they want to know more, they can connect with me on Facebook, Wayne Donnelly, or Hypnosis Down Under is my fan page. And after a while, the two have just become one virtually.
Okay, and that Facebook page is about to change to Go Under, Down Under.
Yeah, I think I should change it. I think that's brilliant.
Thanks to the beautiful butt kicker, Rosie Pekar. So do you tour the states?
Well, if venue suggestions are given to me, I will tour.
You just need an invitation. We always love travelling everywhere. So, us Aussies aren't set in stone. Our IDs aren't set in stone, and that's a wonderful thing to know. So hypnosis is not something to be feared. It's a tool to be utilised for our benefit. So until next week, you've been listening to Until Now, and for more motivation and inspiration, you can head across to Kick Butt with 1T. That's the bloody useless thoughts we fill our brains with, .com.au, because we are Australian. Talk to you all next week. Thanks, Wayne.
Thanks, Rosie.